It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, Ian Rivers over there. And Ian, a little bit different setup for me today. I'm recording from work, so we'll see how this goes. But Wi-Fi pending. We're here. We're doing a podcast a little bit later than expected, but we just want to make the people wait just a little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely wasn't like a planning and scheduling thing on our part that we just didn't, we left it too late. It wasn't any of that,
No,
wasn't any of that.
we just get the people going,
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have everything ready to go for an episode, I think, because we're like, okay, it's cool. We can just push this episode out a little bit. We think we're fine. It's, nothing's really going on. And then Jim Scanlan decides to step down as head women's hockey coach. And all of a sudden there's a big story in Bemidji this week. So Jim Scanlan stepping down as women's head hockey coach, and in a move that I don't think people are necessarily like, it's not shocked. Like, it's not a jaw dropping thing. But I think the timing of it's weird, isn't it?
A little bit. I mean, I would kind of have thought like this is normally the reason you see coaches step down so quickly after the season ends is because you got to get a new coach in there, and you got to get the transfer portal opens pretty rapidly after the season ends. And so you got to start getting, players in. It's been like, a number of weeks. The women's college hockey season's already over. Like, the national champion has been crowned. And so that the timing of it, I think, is the weirdest part. I think it's not a shock. No, it is him stepping down. You wonder sometimes, especially with some quotes that came out, how much of it was his choice or all that, but I don't want to speculate without having spoken to anybody myself. I'm just pulling quotes out of a paper. So the timing was probably the weirdest part. Just having it happen when it did was just a little bit odd once you're 3-4 weeks into the transfer portal already being open.
Do you think that, like, and again, this is all speculation. Do you think that the transfer portal has a little bit to do with it? Like, he was just kind of waiting to see how things moved, or waited till like the dust settled on the portal before doing that? Was it a way, not even like to see who's coming in or leaving, but if a coach announces that they're stepping down, does that make some other players jump ship? You know what I'm saying? Like, was that to kind of protect some of the players that were here, to prevent them from like the uncertainty of a coaching change and then bailing? Or do you think it was just wanted to wait a couple weeks and make a decision? The most real answer is maybe he just wanted to take a couple weeks after the season ended and like get his head right before making this decision. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most likely, is that he just needed some time to think over his options. But it would be weird because I understand like waiting until the transfer portal settles down a little bit. Like maybe there is some truth to that. Maybe he wanted to wait so that maybe all the players wouldn't jump ship again. Like, don't want to restart with yet another coach, or not yet another coach, but like, don't want to restart with another coach and like, but the portal's still open, and those players very well still could jump into the portal. It's not like there's only a week left and They're worried about like, oh man, where would I go now? All the spots are filled up. Like, I think that there's still plenty of time for that to happen. It hasn't, to the best of my knowledge. I don't think we've lost any additional players because of this news, but either one of those could be the answer. If I was told one or the other by Scanlan himself, I would believe it, but neither one of them really make sense to me as to why he would wait, other than maybe he just needed some time. That could be very well what it was.
Right. And sometimes in these, like, everybody, and myself included, by the way, has these big brain, like, oh my gosh, did this happen because of this and this and that? And it might just be like, he told the athletic department that there's a chance that could happen, and he wanted to just take a couple weeks and figure some things out before ultimately making that decision. And it just happened to end up coming out this late. That's probably what happened. If we're just using the Occam's razor version. But you mentioned earlier, there's a few quotes, and Jared Roboto, friend of the podcast, again, stellar hockey coverage. Go give him a follow on Twitter and go by the Bemidji paper if you're up there. But had some quotes talking with Scanlan about leaving. And Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have the official quote up here yet. Did it kind of seem like this year he was kind of already debating whether or not he was coming back this year?
Yeah, it did. It seemed like he was already maybe butting heads with somebody or some people within the athletic department over the last couple of years. And
Or his
again,
heart just wasn't in it too, because of the portal and everything like that.
yeah, the portal I think is going to be one of the most quoted, like when they ask, divorced couples, why did you get divorced? And like Fortnite was a reason in like whatever percent of marriages or some shit. Like,
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say something like money or something.
yeah, but that was a huge meme like 3 years ago when Fortnite was like at its peak, was like people are getting divorced over this game.
Was that really a thing?
I saw a couple news articles. It was like not it wasn't 90% of divorces that like had it listed.
It was
And
like
it
a
was probably
shockingly
like
high number.
it was just one of the things that got brought up like it wasn't, it was 4% of the reason or something like that. Like probably most of it was money or some other reason.
I'm not
But
doubting you. It's just
yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. So like I guarantee
Anyway,
you that the number one cause of like most coaches that are going to be stepping down within the last 2-3 years and within the next 5 years is going to be the transfer portal. Guys, of the older crowd that just don't want to adapt or don't care to adapt or are forced out because they refuse to adapt and they think they can still coach like, like a Dabo Sweeney at Clemson, where he's just like, no, we don't want to use the portal at all. And now we're going to be completely mediocre in the ACC. So like that type of thing is going to start happening. I think the portal is going to be one of the biggest detractors of coaches leaving their
right.
posts.
Well, because you're asking some of these coaches who've spent their entire careers coaching a certain way. I mean, Scanlan's been here 10 years and he spent that time recruiting and developing. And that's the heart of Bemidji State women's hockey. There's just, I know that you look at his overall record and, some people say, well, it's time for a change. And maybe it is just from internally. I don't know what it's like internally, but, or just, he's been here a decade. A breath of fresh air is fine. But also, it's, Bemidji is not an easy place to recruit at times. It's not a big urban area. There's not a ton of areas around there. You have to sell them on Bemidji State. And for some, it's easier than others. And for the thing that Bemidji State always had was, can you every 4 years just get a nice crop of freshmen and develop them through? And by the time they're seniors, can they just be a nice competitive team? And we'll reset the cycle when they graduate. And I think the transfer portal upends the entire way that he planned on building the program. And it's really hard because if you develop a girl who's going to be nice, there's always the threat of transferring, of going to Mankato, of going to the U, of going to Wisconsin. If you end up landing a really, really good player or just one leaving for a different school in general, you don't have time to let them develop through. If they want out, they're just out. And some coaches are, whether it's, whenever we say not willing, it's not like we're saying these coaches are being like abrasive to it, but it's just like why they've spent their whole entire coaching careers trying to coach a specific way. And now this thing has kind of gotten flipped on its head. And I don't blame some coaches for just going, this isn't for me. Like Nick Saban of all people did it in college football. Like it's not for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. And like, it's just like you said, if you bring in these freshmen that you're thinking, all right, we don't normally get contributions from freshmen. We do not need them to be outstanding when they're freshmen. They're going to grow with this program. They're going to become, that's what you saw from Mankato. All of these fans are so upset all the time at Mankato for having 25-year-old seniors playing against the Gophers or somebody who's got like all these 18, 19-year-old kids. It's like, no wonder you won because you're playing with a freaking senior team. It's like, yeah, but that's how Mankato had to win because they don't get those high-level recruits that the U does or teams out east like Boston schools do. And so like now if you get a freshman in and they perform above their expectations, they're getting scooped by another program. And that was always a risk. Like even before the portal days really started, like you just had to, it was more of you had to wait. You had to sit out a year.
It's just so much easier for players to move.
Right. And so now it seems like you don't want them to overperform when they're a freshman. Like, man, maybe if Polkamp would have like
Maybe we would have
got
sucked
two
a
less
little bit,
goals and two less
like
assists, maybe we would not have to. But that's just the way it is. Like you're planning on, and I think that's a thing that I've seen get thrown around, and it's definitely part of the reason that I used to be a huge fan of college basketball. Like CJ can attest to this. Me walking into the booth at KBSB, got my laptop and my phone with March Madness games on. We're about to record, go on the air. But I've almost like fallen out of love with the game of college basketball because part of the charm of any college sport for me has always been watching these guys get on campus as a freshman and watching their entire career. You see them on social media, post stuff, and then they put out little stories in the off season about, oh, this, he went home and helped build a farm for whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like you see these players like grow up, and
right.
now it's kind of taken away from that little bit of charm of the college game where it's like, yeah, it's basically the same as free agency where players just kind of go wherever the money is, or in some cases it's NIL, in some cases it's going to be playing time, in some cases. Yeah, if a coach leaves your program, absolutely, you should be able to leave because most players probably commit to a coach more than they commit to a program.
Right.
So I get it. There should be reasons that you could leave. And that's the only thing. Like, I understand where you're coming from with the whole, you try to build the team one way and now you can't because every year you're starting over with 10 new players because all of your freshmen that you brought in that were better than we expected them to be this year, now they're gone. And now when you get those seniors to be finally playing well as sophomores, juniors, they're gone before you can get to them at their peak. So that's the frustrating part for a smaller school
Well,
such as BSU.
And the portal, like it's really easy to just get in and rip the portal too. And I think, like you talked about, it does give some players some agency. They do get a chance where, I committed to this coach, he left. Now I should, like, why am I stuck here? So like it's not all bad. The players have gotten some good things out of this. It could very easily be seen that we're both trying to rip the portal, and we're not doing that inherently. Like, it's not that it's all bad. I think there's critiques, there's things that are wrong with it, but it's not inherently bad. But overall, back to kind of Scanlan stepping down, this is a guy who had been here for 10 years. He had been around, obviously coaching in East Grand, boys and girls hockey for 20 years combined about, and then coming to Bemidji State. And obviously the Beavers over his time, and especially in the last few years, weren't particularly strong on the ice. I mean, his career record is 118, 172, and 21. And it's really easy to say, oh, they lost a ton of games, and now getting him out of here is a good thing. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but a change is probably needed just for a guy who's been here 10 years. And like we talked about, if he's not in on the portal, if he doesn't feel like he can do it, then it's probably is time for a change. It just kind of feels like, I don't know. I mean, it's a big change for a school in Bemidji State that doesn't necessarily, coaching changes don't happen very often at this place.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that's an oddity. It's out of left field a little bit. The timing of it kind of, you had lulled yourself to sleep. But he's out. And now we've got a new head coach, a new bench boss that stepped in. I don't know if you want to transition now to that news that broke.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about
really rapidly within a couple of days for sure after Scanlan. Yeah, had stepped down is Amber. I believe it's pronounced Fryklund.
I think Fryklund.
We'll have to get an official.
We will be corrected no matter what. Trust us.
Yeah, exactly.
Lucas, if you're listening, please let us know.
Yeah. She was named the 6th head coach in Bemidji State women's hockey history. And I think it's a pretty good hire. I know that she worked with, some sort of development program that I'm blanking on right now. But she has some pretty good credentials, and she's been working with this program now for a while too. So I think it's a super good hire. And there's plenty of hoops to jump through as a BSU hockey coach, regardless of who the coach is. There's going to be a lot of obstacles in the way at a school like this. So this isn't going to be some sort of a magic potion that's going to now all of a sudden rocket us up to Minnesota and Wisconsin levels of success. But, hopefully there can be some new blood in the organization, at the university, I should say, not the organization, but, some new blood, a fresh start. Let's try it again. Nothing against what Scanlan had done. He was the winningest head coach in BSU women's hockey history. And so obviously he did a pretty good job for most of his tenure here, but towards the end, maybe there's some fresh ideas that need to be being brought in. So I'm super happy with the hire. I'm not like the most qualified person to make opinions on women's college hockey, but I think it's a good hire.
Well, and I think it's what you talked about. It's just a nice hire. It's a good, easy transition. Fryklund, excuse me, has been in the program in different roles. I mean, she was inducted into the Bemidji State Athletics Hall of Fame. She was a player there. She played from 2000 to 03, had 122 points, 59 goals, 63 assists. She was the program's all-time leading scorer and is the leading goal scorer, second in assists, according to the BSU Beavers webpage. The first Beaver in program history to reach 100 career points and just one of three to be able to do that. The first ever all WCHA selection in 2002, and she was recognized twice for that. So she's a good player. She's done some coaching before. She was an assistant coach with Proctor Hermantown Marshall, the Mirage, from 09 to 11. She had also been a little on the BSU coaching staff in and out, and like you talked about, had been doing some other development stuff. She had also worked in USA Hockey developmental camps, was a coach at the USA Top 66 Player Selection Camp in 2017. Earlier this year, Fryklund was named to the coaching staff of the 2025 U18 women's national team that'll compete in the World Championships in Finland. She's going to be an assistant coach on that staff. And I think that's the intriguing part of this hire is it's a combination of new blood while also being a part of the program. You know what I mean? Like, she's somebody who knows everybody. That name resonates with people in Bemidji State women's hockey. And she's also somebody who's been around to Duluth, around the Proctor Hermantown area, somebody who's been around the state and doing some other stuff. I think it's just a good hire in the sense of very connected in the hockey community. Not that whoever they were going to hire next wouldn't have been, but just a good hire. It's somebody who's one of the best players in your program's history who's stepping in to fill that role. That doesn't always mean that you're going to be a success as a coach, but I think overall, just the connection she has set up, the past history, I'm not going to say a home run hire, but I think this is as good of a hire as Bemidji State could have got. I'm very excited to see where the program goes with her at the helm.
Yeah, 100%. I think that there's not really a super... This is going to sound pretty bad, but you can't really go any further south than the trajectory.
Especially the last couple of years.
Yeah, of the trajectory the team has already kind of been on these last couple of years. So get somebody in there that worked with the USA hockey developmental camps. She's got connections, and I think that's a big thing. And if you have any chance of turning this into a competitive team, even if it's, hey, every once in a while we steal something off of these top three teams in the conference, and we can put up a fight when we play against UMD instead of losing by 7 or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Maybe don't get 10 put on your head by the Buckeyes and the Gophers and Badgers. But yeah, I mean, like I said, not a whole ton to say about it other than I'm excited for a new direction, hopefully, for this women's hockey program.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And I think overall as well, when you promote somebody from within, even though the transfer portal is open, I think that just kind of is a sign to the players who are there of like, hey, things are going to change. Obviously things are changing, but it's not a drastic change. It'll be interesting to see. And I'm not an X's and O's women's hockey person. So I can't tell you that this is exactly what's going to change. And stylistically, they're going to be different. That I don't know. And it'd be really interesting to people who do what they kind of expect to be different or what they expect to stay the same. But if you're somebody in that program, you've seen her every day. You know who she is. And some people probably, I'm putting words in people's mouths, but be excited, like, oh, cool. Like if he's Jim stepping down, that stinks, whatever. Now she's going to be in charge though. I know her. Like I feel comfortable with her as my head coach, and it prevents that jump ship nature. Whereas if you hire somebody halfway across the country to come in and run the program, but at the end of the day, it's like you said, the program just needs to get better. And that's not all on Scanlan. That's just kind of where things are at. But if it's time for a change, I think she's the right person to kind of lead through the change. We got some people who are listening right now, whether on Facebook or X, YouTube. Feel free to leave a comment. If you do, we are broadcasting live. Feel free to drop one in because Ian is testing it out here. He's got one in our chat. Can we pull it up? Hey, there's Ian right there.
Whoa.
Whoa.
I didn't know we could do that, man. That's awesome.
we could do that. So there we go. It works. I know we tested with it earlier and had some bugs, but I think we're good to go. So if you want to leave a comment, feel free to drop one in. We're talking on the Beaver Banter podcast about Jim Scanlan stepping down as the women's hockey head coach. We've talked about that a lot, so I think we can kind of move on to that next topic, Ian. But if you guys want to put your thoughts in, feel free to leave them in the chat. All right, let's talk a little transfer portal news for men's hockey. I think the biggest thing is last week we talked about Polkamp leaving, and we didn't quite know at the time of recording where he was going. And then like less than 24 hours later, it happens because that's the rule of podcasting. As soon as you finish recording, something big happens. Ian, where did he go?
I'm so sorry. What are we?
We're talking about.
There will be
a
press conference, by the way, in about 15 minutes. Stepping on our toes, but the head coach Amber Fryklund will be doing her introductory press conference about 15 minutes.
Darn it, we should get a reaction
on Twitter. So that's why I was a bit distracted. What are you talking about in terms of transfers here, CJ? Let's start that.
Where did Polkamp go?
Oh, he went to the freaking Denver Pioneers, man. Yeah, I don't even feel bad about stepping on his toes, but
at least it wasn't UND. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the only positive thing I have to say about it. I'm not an expert on Denver hockey, but I don't really know where he's going to fit into their defensive core super well. But we'll see. I mean, that's really all I have to say about it. I don't have a huge opinion on it. We knew it was going to be basically between there or North Dakota. So I guess I'm glad we don't have to see him, twice a year, if not more. So
don't have to have the threat of him coming into the Sanford Center and scoring a couple goals, and just not that he would do anything. It's nothing against him, but it's just you really got to twist the knife here.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So
any other transfer portal news, anything that's relevant for Bemidji State men's hockey?
Well, I believe it was either last Tuesday evening after we finished recording or like Wednesday, Alexander Lundman officially entered his name into the transfer portal as well for Bemidji State men's hockey. Again, something that we kind of talked about last episode where it wouldn't have been a huge shock to see him go into the portal. I don't believe that he or Lewandowski have landed anywhere yet, at least in college hockey. So that's kind of a little bit relevant to BSU. And then they did bring in sort of a defensive replacement for Eric Polkamp. They brought in AJ McCauley, who will be a junior from Alaska Fairbanks. Now, I think it's a pretty good get. I'm not necessarily as excited about him as I am about Carter Ranclev in terms of the offensive production, but of course, McCauley's a defender, so why would I be? He had 15 points this last season. I know he played a fair amount on the power play. He had 3 power play goals. 5 goals total on the season, 10 assists. And he was a pretty good a penalty killer. He led the team in blocks. He had 38 blocks. Nobody else on the team had more than 33. And then even third place on the team was 28. So that seems to fit right in with what Saratori wants. And I guess to stay on theme with the Beavers defensive core, it's another left-handed shot defenseman coming in. So you would have hoped that would have been the only thing that would have made him like just amazing would have been if he was a right shot defenseman. But either way, he played over 20 minutes a game for an Alaska team that was, to their credit, better than BSU was, at least in terms of a pairwise standing last season. So pretty excited about that one. It brings a little bit more stability to a defensive core for the Beavers that I think might have not been, probably wouldn't have been as good regardless in terms of offensive production. But was a little bit thin after both Loft and Polkamp left, and now I think this helps bolster that room yet again. But now the problem becomes 2 years from now, when we have 5 defensemen leave in the same offseason. So that'll be interesting.
That's future problem.
Yeah,
we'll just worry about
that's what the portal's for. We love the portal.
You will figure it out. One college, if anything, now is just so much more 1 year at a time, and that's what I'm telling myself. We'll just focus on this year's team.
Yeah, exactly. We'll handle that. You used to get a new head coach. Like I remember when the Gophers hired PJ Fleck, and I'm like, all right, it's going to be pretty crap for a couple years. Give him time to build it up, and it's almost like now, maybe you need 1 or 2 years to kind of get your guys in, but
right
at the end of the day, you can turn things around a lot quicker, and things can go south a lot quicker. Just ask your friends over at Northern Michigan. I know that they've picked up a couple of recruits over the last couple of days, so they're filling those holes, and they had a huge recruiting class coming in, so they weren't going to be able to fit all those players on their roster anyways. But yeah, AJ McCauley coming in for Alaska Fairbanks, or from Alaska Fairbanks, if I said 4, but I think it's a good signing, or good transfer to bring in. And I'm pretty excited. I think we're in a pretty good spot for next year, honestly. Like we've lost a couple players, but yeah, in terms of I think this team can be at least as good as the team was this year. Maybe it'll just be a different route. Maybe we won't win as many games with high scoring goal totals, but maybe we'll have a little bit better defensive core and we'll win a lot more low scoring games. I'm not sure exactly, but I still feel pretty confident in this team moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, overall, losing Polkamp is just, it stings, but they are able to recover a little bit in the portal. I know they didn't do a lot last year. It's because they didn't really have anybody go out. So this year is really one of the first years we've gotten to see Saratori kind of work the portal. And I know you kind of touched on it already, but what's like a grade if you were to give him for handling this year's transfer portal with everybody that left? And maybe you include that in your grade if those guys end up leaving the program anyways. But from where the program was pre-portal to now that the dust has kind of settled on the transfer portal, how would you grade Saratori and just kind of the change of talent on the roster?
I'd give it a B, I think, because they did replace some of the point production lost by Leighton Road, who, by the way, scored his first career pro goal for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. So congrats to Leighton.
Coachella Valley Firebirds. What a name.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, they kind of replaced Ranclev for Leighton Road in terms of point production. I think that's sort of a 1-for-1 swap, maybe, sort of, kind of. McCauley definitely probably won't be as good as Polkamp, at least in terms of an offensive threat. And I think that one of the things that stinks a little bit is you wish that they could bring, like, one of the things you can improve your team in the past, right? What have we complained about? Center. This team doesn't recruit centers very well, and they don't have enough right shot defensemen. The portal should help us fix that way sooner. If we recruit a center, he's going to be here for 2 or 3 years, maybe. And if he is, he's going to be a freshman. And then it's like, how much? Like, yeah, Jake McLean's a 4th line center, but it's going to take maybe next year. You can move up the line chart, hopefully. Now you can just go and find players that fit your needs much quicker. And he didn't necessarily do that, at least from a fan base perspective, wanting more right shot defensemen. Maybe he just does. Well, obviously he doesn't care about it, but maybe it's just not a big deal to him at all. And he doesn't care. We'll see how it affects us. I think that those 2 positions especially have a big part in why we don't have very good special teams, because it makes it harder to clear pucks out when you're on your backhand. It makes it harder to win faceoffs and have a good power play when you're constantly giving up the first 30 seconds of your power play because you can't win a faceoff. So I'd give him a B because I think that he's replaced some production, but maybe hasn't brought in much in terms of helpful in positions that we may have needed. And the other thing is maybe like a backup goaltender with having Enright leave. But then again, you kind of want Robbins to get some more looks in the net too. So I'm not super upset about that one.
Yeah, overall, could have been better. Was pretty good, all things considered. And Bemidji State,
and it's not over. Right. It kind of feels like it's over, because of how many slots they still have on scholarship here, but they still technically could have people leave and come in. Like, so this might not be over yet, but we'll keep you
Right.
posted.
Anything else with BSU men's hockey that we want to touch on, Ian?
Nothing that comes to mind right now. I know it's been like 10 days, so there could have been anything that happened in
Could have
those
been
10
anything.
days. But I think like the three main things were Lundman leaving, Polk Camp officially committing to Denver, who will be in the national championship game tomorrow, by the way. They won against Boston University yesterday in overtime, and they'll be playing Boston College, who beat the pants out of Michigan for nothing. So
You hate to see it.
you hate to see it, but
You hate to
yeah,
see it.
that's that.
That's that. Was anybody down? And if anybody's listening right now to the stream, leave in the comments. Has anybody been to the Final Four or the Frozen Four, excuse me, down in St. Paul? I've heard some kind of mixed reports on how things were handling down there. Has it not been traveled well? Like, or is it a lot of in town people there for the Frozen Four? How are you looking at some of that?
Well, I know that tickets were on sale as early as yesterday for like $16 or something like that, or like maybe that was Wednesday night. Cheap tickets. I think they had a really tough time getting people in the building for a Frozen Four that wasn't somewhere like cool, right? It's St. Paul. It's not Tampa. Like last year, people went to Tampa because
you could go to
it's
Tampa
a vacation too. Like we want to get out of our cold states and go to a nice warm state. Now, yeah, it's April, so it's not really like Minnesota. It's beautiful in Minnesota right now, but
right.
It's not on many people's bucket
vibe,
lists to go to St. Paul.
Right. It's a fun vibe down by the X and like that strip of buildings right there and all the businesses. It's a fun little thing, but yeah, there's nothing where it's like, oh my goodness, you need to absolutely do X, Y, and Z. You're there for the hockey. And for some people that can kind of impact tourism. I also think too, the fact that it's, it's a lot of East Coast hockey people going out there. And, like we talked about, St. Paul's not much of a destination for them, possibly. And also, it's a plane ride for them. Like they got to book a flight, they got to do whatever. Whereas if it's somebody local, and I think that's what they're banking on whenever they schedule the Frozen Four to be in St. Paul, is that at least one Minnesota team is going to be in there, or North Dakota.
Or right. I mean, Wisconsin could have potentially made it this year too. It looked like for a while, but yeah, none of those local teams actually made it in. The closest would have been, I think, Michigan is closer than Denver in terms of Ann Arbor to St. Paul and Denver to St. Paul. So I think, but yeah, not a very good crowd base for what you'd like to see for a Frozen Four, especially in the state of hockey. So,
right. It is what it is. I mean, not every year is going to be a home run. And like you talked about, when it's in Tampa, when it's somewhere way out there, it's a little bit easier to justify going over there. It's a little bit of stuff in there, but St. Paul is always a great vibe. If you're down there, if you're into it, especially with hockey. I was down there for the state volleyball tournament for covering a team for play-by-play. And even that, like having that full of people around, it's a fun vibe. So it's a shame that there's not a lot of as many people there as I think would hope, because when it's rocking, it's a fun place to spend a couple days. But anyway, I digress. So anything else really in college hockey generally that we need to speak of? How are we looking in terms of our bracket challenge stuff? Ian, do we have any update on that? The 2-week break between the Frozen Four and the tournament kind of always throws me off as I'm giving you time to make sure everything's all set up.
That's what I was just going to look at, by the way, as you brought that up. So it's very weird timing that we're on the same page with this. Yeah, Google, I don't want this. Please get off my screen.
This is a great on-air production meeting we're having right now.
Yeah, it's a freaking ad pops up right over like the toolbar, so I can't click on any options. I'm like, all right, fuck. Group results. Looks like the winner will end up being Sam Krollman with 17 points so far. Both him and Jack Hittinger picked Boston College to win the entire bracket. So no matter who wins the national championship game, Sam will still be ahead of Jack. So congrats to Sam on his Beaver Banter Bracket Challenge championship.
Big friend of the podcast.
Yours truly finished in third. So I'll take my pat on the back any way I can get it. Top half, baby. Top half.
Top half. Yeah, go for it. Anyway, so there's our bracket challenge that we had going on for a little bit. Had some good submissions, so it was really fun to see, and hopefully we'll keep doing that kind of through the next few years. Kind of keep letting that grow. It's a fun little contest to do with people who listen to the podcast.
Yeah. Next year, hopefully it's a little bit bigger. Kind of started it late this year. Didn't really know what I was doing entirely. Maybe we'll try.
To be fair, we were still a little bitter that the Beavers weren't in, so we just didn't really want to think about the tournament.
That's kind of true. That's very true.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we've divulged from it long enough. We're going to talk about some spring sports. The weather's turning around up in Bemidji the last few days. I know. Don't look at the forecast for next week, but this week it's sitting in a pretty good spot. They've been able to play some games up there at the BSU baseball field and the BSU softball field. How are things looking for the baseball team? Well, their record currently sits at 1-31. They played a couple games on Wednesday, losing at the BSU baseball field to UMD. They got swept in a doubleheader at Sioux Falls late last week, and now they're getting ready for a weekend series tomorrow, a doubleheader against the Mavericks of Minnesota State, and then they play the Mavs again on Sunday to wrap up that series before a midweek series next week at Minnesota Crookston. That's where things sit for the baseball team. Ian, what's the softball team sitting at?
Well, softball's not going super well compared to last season. They did just split with St. Cloud State Wednesday of this past week, so just a couple days ago. But before that, there was quite a few losses in there, getting swept by Concordia St. Paul, Sioux Falls, Minnesota Duluth, Minnesota State, and Winona State before they finally picked up their third conference win of the season against St. Cloud State in a doubleheader. And so they sit at 3-11 so far in the NSIC. They need to start picking up some wins and quick to get themselves back into a position to make the NSIC tournament again. And I mean, it's nice to win softball games. So in bigger news, Stella Dolan broke the record for most appearances by a pitcher. It was either appearances by a pitcher or it was appearances in general.
I think it's just appearances. I think it's just games played.
Right. So I think it was 115 that she set the record with, and she pitched, I believe, 16.1 innings in that doubleheader.
16 to 30 innings, but yeah.
Hey, stop it. Anyways, yeah, it's the same thing technically. It says
technically, yeah.
So yeah, 16 and a third is what I should have said. You're correct.
Like in a soccer game when somebody says they lost 2 points to 1. Like, no, it's cool. Two goals.
Okay, yeah. No, that's fair. That's valid. You had every right to call me out on that then.
No, it's fine. That's the one thing of expertise I got. I just needed to get it out there.
For sure. Yeah, so 16 and a third innings is pretty impressive. You know, I know that softball, you don't quite use as much arm strength as in baseball, throwing that ball 90 miles an hour.
Well, it's a completely different throwing motion too.
Exactly. Yeah. So statistically, they typically can throw more innings in a game and in a day, but still 16 is
and their games are short too. So that also is.
Yeah. That's like 2 full games essentially out of Dolan there. So congrats to her, breaking records. I apologize about the terrible pun I made on Twitter. But
some group chats called you out for that.
They don't know what they're talking about, man. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, you tried to, all of a sudden you're like telling me, you're telling everybody I tweeted it. Look, I have bad tweets, but that wasn't one of them.
See, the only reason I did that is because I knew that you also got tagged in it. And so I was like, all right, he's going to be able to come in here and see that and defend himself. So I didn't feel bad about just like making a joke like, oh yeah, I can't believe CJ posted that, because I knew you'd have the opportunity to defend yourself. So I wasn't feeling bad about it.
This is inside baseball here with our Twitter feed. You can tell sometimes when we both see something like this is awesome content, I'm going to comment on it or do something with it, and then both realize that we saw it at the same time. We did that today.
We did that today. Yeah.
We did that today with a post about the Chet, which is, well, look, we'll talk about how great the Chet is more than once. We have no problem doing that, but we both talked about it generally enough where we're both like, oops.
Yeah.
But
yeah. It's something that we have to work on, and we will. This is our first
I regret nothing.
a joined Twitter page. So if you ever see something like that, like, I wonder why
You see a double post?
why did they double post this? Like, it's probably just because we forgot to check if it had already been quote tweeted yet.
Or we did it at the exact same time.
Yeah, like the exact same time. So that's that basically.
So men's golf, Ian, they had a pretty good weekend.
They did, yes. Men's golf over the last weekend competed in the Upper Iowa Spring Invite. They finished first out of 11 on Saturday, and they fell, unfortunately, to second out of 11. So they did not win that invite, but finishing second, that's like their best result of the spring so far. And even going back to last fall when they're kind of doing their preseason work is what I like to call it. They didn't really have a result of any of those kinds. So now they have some match play in Spring Hill, Kansas, coming up this next week. Yep, next week, April 17th on Wednesday. And then we're already into the NSIC championships next weekend. So next week we can kind of bring you a little bit more of a preview for that. Obviously, we don't have a ton to preview for it, but yeah, keep your head out, keep your eyes open for the NSIC championships next weekend for men's golf.
In women's tennis, last weekend they played in Mankato, or technically St. Peter, against the Mavs. They lost that. Now they are going to play tomorrow in Bismarck, where they will play MSU Moorhead on Friday, and then on Saturday they will take on the Marauders of UMary. That's where the tennis team right now, they're at 1-8 overall on the season. Looking at the women's track and field, they right now are kind of in that lull. I know they had the Norse invite down at Luther. Now they're getting ready and technically are in the middle of competing in LA at the Cal State LA Brian Clay, competing at their hosting that meet. But overall, that's always the thing about spring sports, is your season is so much in disarray because of weather, but then they'll throw you in a trip to LA, or they'll throw you in a trip to Texas, or they'll throw in a trip to Florida, and you're like, cool, I guess, yeah, sure, I'll be in a spring sport.
Right, exactly. So there is benefits as much as it is kind of crummy to play a spring sport, at least an outdoor spring sport in the state of Minnesota, especially northern Minnesota. But
well, and part of the team is going to Mankato because they're also going to compete at the Minnesota State Open. So it's sending part of your team one way, part of the team the other. Sometimes you send a specific set of runners, a specific set of event people. Can you tell I don't have a big track a lexicon there? But so sorry, track people. Anyway, looking at women's golf, they're going to be competing on Monday and Tuesday in the Wildcat Classic, and that's the last thing that they will compete in until the NSIC Championships, which will be on April 26th. So Monday and Tuesday, they'll be down in Wayne, Nebraska for that. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about championships. Spring sports season, again, continues just to be a blur.
Right. Yeah, it seems like every year, by the time winter sports have officially wrapped up, spring sports are almost half over. So women's golf did make a 29-stroke improvement on day two to finish 9th at the Augie invite. Of course, 9th out of 10. So they improved from 9th to 10th. How bad must your first day have been to need a 29-stroke improvement to jump up one spot? But hey,
we'll take it.
We'll take it.
How you start. It's
we'll
how you
take it. Yep, exactly. So pretty good Saturday there for that, or Tuesday. I'm sorry. Why did I think that was Saturday? Tuesday.
Your whole week is thrown off with this late podcast.
Right. That's so true. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think we've missed anything super chaotic.
Not until we end the stream.
Yeah, I'm sure Coach Fryklund's press conference has started up by now. It's probably live on Twitter. It's on probably the women's hockey page on Twitter. I'm sure it's on Facebook, wherever they have social media. Otherwise, it might be on bsubeavers.com as well. There might be a link. So, yeah, if you're interested in watching that, it's probably kicking off or just about kicked off a couple minutes ago. So, other than that, I don't have anything more for you. Next week, we might have a special guest for you. I think that we're gonna. I think it's slowed down enough where it's pretty fair to assume that we can bring him on and recap the men's hockey season for anybody who wasn't aware. I think I've already talked about this like 2 weeks ago that we're planning on having Lucas on. So unless
Lucas
he's changed his mind, that might be something to keep your eye on for next week, is kind of a wrap up of the season and looking forward to the future of what Beaver hockey could hold.
Yeah, I think so. Because the moment we schedule him to come is when something big will drop, and then it'll be a perfect time to have him on the podcast. So
right, exactly.
Or the day after we have him on, something monumental is going to shift, and we're going to be like, well, I guess. So
yeah.
Until then, this has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. Thanks everybody for listening in on the live stream. It's something that we've toyed with, is opening things up to commenters and doing a Q&A and mailbag and all that kind of stuff. We really do want to do that in the future. So there's a pretty good, we have a chance to kind of look at some numbers and work on some new stuff in our broadcasting system. So we are ready to go, as they say.
Yeah, of course, like if you have any issues watching a live, if you'd like to comment and you can't figure out a way how to do it, reach out to us, because we would love to be able to, help you try to figure it out rather than just, having you get frustrated and then not comment ever. So
DMs are open.
DMs are always open for any question. So feel free.
This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. We'll catch you guys